Big C's, Comeback Kids, taking on the United Players, the Destroyers. These teams have actually swapped identities, it seems like, this season. Last year, it was the United Players who couldn't seem to get right, the Big C's Comeback Kids were playing every matchup. This year, it's switched. The United Players are playing the matchups great. They almost pulled off the big upset against the Gaff. If Emmanuel Sanders has a better game, I think that the United Players do win that game. So it just they have two very close losses. Despite the 2-2 record, they could easily be 4-0. So the United Players is probably the most impressive team week to week, being that we look at them, don't expect much, and then they're coming out with the W. On the Comeback Kids side, they've just been a bugaboo for Appease the Gods. They knocked them out of the playoffs last year, and then they had the big upset victory last week. Alshon Jeffrey's return to the lineup was a real big reason why. Alshon was great. He had a pretty good game, and with Carson Wentz back in the lineup for the Eagles and Alshon Jeffrey in the lineup for the Eagles, that connection is only going to get stronger and stronger. And with, I think, what was his name? Mike Wallace, he's out for the Eagles, so more balls are going Jeffrey's way. So that's going to be a great play for the Comeback Kids the rest of the season. Jarvis Landry with Baker Mayfield's a great play. And I'm really starting to like Austin Eckler. I think that he's one of those diamonds in the rough. Because even though Melvin Gordon's he's a top 5 running back, Austin Eckler's still able to get some good production in there. And it's really helping the Comeback Kids deal with the injury to Devonta Freeman, who we're not sure whether he's going to be coming back this week. Chris Thompson's another guy that the kids could take a look at, being that he's a very, shifty player and has a lot of dynamic to him. He's very versatile. So if you can get Chris Thompson out of the backfield and let him get loose, he can do some damage for you. On the United player side, it's Tom Brady and James White. That connection was awesome last week. That connection would have beat most teams in the league. But the Gaff isn't most teams, and that's why the UP ended up losing. That Jets backfield has been a problem for him to figure out. He probably needs to look at Kerryon Johnson. Kerryon getting the carries in Detroit now, and he's actually a running back that they're committed to. So Johnson's a guy that the UP may want to look at. And then Cooper Kupp. I mean, this guy is turning into a very, very good receiver. Not just a cog in the LA Rams system, but a bona fide, star, a guy that you could leave in your lineup and do big things. Looks like they're going to go with Doug Baldwin, who's coming off of that knee injury. Baldwin was serviceable last week, and the UP could really use, some more dynamic plays out of their lineup. That being said, this matchup sets up pretty good, but I think this is actually going to be an inverse. I got Big C's Comeback Kids getting their second win of the season, going to 2-2 in Omega, and making starting to make things interesting against the United Players. I got the Big C's Comeback Kids winning 115 to 110. Moving on to our next matchup, a grudge match in the Omega Conference. We have Appease the Gods taking on Patty's Twins. Both teams rolled into this matchup at 2-2. Both teams have star-studded quarterbacks, and both teams were a part of that big draft trade that yielded Appease the Gods, Royce Freeman, and Drew Brees. And it yielded the Twins, Keenan Allen, Allen was not in the Twins lineup last week, but he probably will get back in there this week. He hasn't been the home run hit that the Twins expected so far this year. After that first week, he had a big game, but the rest of the weeks he's been, pretty pedestrian. I expect Keenan to bounce back eventually, though. He is one of the better receivers in pro football, and that doesn't change. AB is AB, but the Steelers are in flux, and I think AB is due for a huge breakout performance, and that performance could possibly come this week. David Johnson is a guy who should find some holes running against the San Francisco 49ers. I talked about Melvin Gordon's success against them, so I don't see why David couldn't find success as well. Now, on ATG side, things are starting to look a little concerning. Drew Brees for the 40-point week, then he comes back with an 8-point week on the road. That's kind of what you get with Drew Brees at certain points, especially when he goes from a home to road games. He does come down to earth a bit. But the biggest concern that I'm looking at in the ATG's lineup is a guy like Lamar Miller. He was a guy that ATG kept to be a core piece of the team, and he's losing carries to guys like Alfred Blue. So Lamar's situation is worth monitoring. Joe Mixon finally returns to the lineup. That's going to be a huge boost for ATG. And then, obviously, we got to see what happens with Rob Gronkowski. He was a little bit hobbled, so we'll see how he goes. That being said, this matchup sets up as a very, very interesting one. I do believe that we're getting to the point now where these losses are going to start hurting. This matchup in particular, because both teams are in exactly the same space, and both teams need this victory. But that being said, it's going to be a tough one to call. But I'm going to go with appease the gods here. I think they're on life support, and I think that their plays are a little bit more substantial, especially with Drew Brees closing things out on Monday night. I've got ATG winning this matchup 120-117. And moving on to the prestige matchup of the week. In the Alpha Conference we go. As 3-1, squad underestimated goes to war with the Mean Machine. All right, this is one of the bigger rivalries in the Alpha Conference. Obviously, these two teams, history have them attached at the hip. Squad underestimated, after losing in week 1, has probably been the most impressive team in the PPL. They had a huge explosion last week thanks to Kirk Cousins and Adam Thielen getting into the business on that Thursday night game. I expect that to continue. I think that the Minnesota Vikings are going to have to throw more. It's starting to look like Dalvin Cook's a little more banged up than people realize. So that's going to force Minnesota into more passing situations. Marshawn Lynch was a welcome sight for him to have a big game. I believe he had over 100 yards rushing. If that can continue against the Chargers, squad underestimated is looking great in the flex position. I've sung the praises of Christian McCaffrey and Saquon Barkley many times. And I expect them to continue to do the things that they've been doing. The Josh Gordon play is going to be an interesting one, just to see if he finally shows up and blows up. He did catch a couple of passes last week. So Thursday night is going to be a fun night to see how Josh Gordon plays in that New England offense. I like squad's plays as far as Jordan Reed on Monday night. He's Alex Smith's top target on that offense. And then the New Orleans head coach is going to be another interesting part of that, especially against the Mean Machine, who's going to have Alvin Kamara and Michael Thomas on Monday night to help him bail him out of that matchup. Looks like they're going back to Andrew Luck, which is not surprising. Andrew Luck blew up last week against the Houston Texans. 4 touchdowns, 450 yards. So that's definitely a guy they're going to get back in their lineup. Things are starting to get a little concerning for Odell. He's not doing the things that we expected him to do so far this season, at least from my perspective. He's a guy that should be getting, if he's not getting a touchdown every week, he should at least have 100 yards. How that's not happening is really pitiful. And they really need to start looking at Eli Manning and wondering if it's time for them to move on. The John Brown play, as I said last week, was going to be a good play. I was not surprised at all that he was able to essentially win the matchup for the Mean Machine. I know Kareem Hunt ended up with the big points at the end, but it was John Brown's game that actually won it for the Machine, along with, obviously, an Alvin Kamara 40-point outburst. But let's talk about Kareem Hunt. Kareem was the man. Kareem finally got loose, was able to run the football. The Chiefs stuck to the run, and Kamara was also able to get into Kareem Hunt was also able to get into the end zone. It's going to be huge for the Mean Machine because Hunt was starting to kind of slide. If Hunt's able to give him that kind of production, he should be able to defeat squad underestimated. And I believe that's what's going to happen. I've got the Mean Machine winning in the prestige matchup of the week. 130-122. I think the Mean Machine leaves no doubt this week and shines it up real nice for squad underestimated and beats them down in an Alpha Conference showdown. Alrighty, so that's this week's matchups. Hope everybody enjoyed PPL Live. Good luck, and may the odds be ever in your favor.